We have Lewis Porter on the line right now, pianist, scholar, biographer of John Coltrane, and he's had a hand in putting this release out, and in the previous one that was done for Atlantic and never released. It's called the last Atlantic album that we featured a while ago, called Metaphysics. Lewis, welcome to WPFW.
Thanks, Rusty. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about this 2-CD collection called the Solo Recordings.
Well, Alan Sukoenig, who we expect to be talking to a little later, he's a New Yorker, went to college at University of Pennsylvania, and he's a serious jazz fan, at that time an amateur saxophonist, and decided to check out some local jazz people and got to know Hassan well enough that they became kind of friendly, and he set up these kind of informal recording dates with his portable reel-to-reel recorder. So it wasn't one of those things where someone's in the audience and the performer doesn't know. I mean, Hassan knew he was performing for Alan and his tape recorder. And I found out about these tapes, I would say, 1995, I think it was.
Okay, wow. Mm-hmm.
And, well, this is the stupid part of it. I call myself stupid sometimes because I heard them back in 1995, and I said, wow, that's amazing. And I called Alan and said, I hope you don't mind that I'm making copies for myself, because he had donated them to the Institute of Jazz Studies, the Jazz Archive, which was at the Rutgers campus where I was teaching. And he said, no, that's fine. And then I put it out of my mind. And it wasn't, and that's 95, and just to show you how dumb I am, it wasn't until 2017 that I was talking with some friend. I was doing some gigs in Philadelphia, actually. As you know, I'm a pianist. I was playing with Odine Pope and Bobby Zankel, giving a concert in Philadelphia. And everybody was asking about Hassan. Hey, Lou, you're always coming up with, rare stuff, and what about Hassan? And I said, gee, what about Hassan? So I emailed Alan and said, I don't know if you remember me, but are you still, have you been thinking about putting those out? And Alan wrote me back, and then we followed up with some phone calls. And he said, not only have I been thinking about it, I'm racking my brain because I don't have contacts with record companies. And I said, well, I do, so let me ask around. So really, that's why it took so long, is because I fell asleep on it for 22 years. But the good news is they're out now for everybody to enjoy.
Absolutely. Well, you and Alan didn't fall asleep on the earlier release, the one that came out, the Lost Atlantic album that Odine Pope performed on.
Exactly.
So.
And what happened there is I got in touch with people I knew in the record business, and it turned out the best fit was this label, Omnivore, where it wasn't, most labels, it's kind of a thing, well, maybe we could do that, I guess so. But Omnivore was like, oh my God, the legendary Hassan, we can't wait to do it. They were so enthusiastic, and they knew about Hassan. But they said, we're a little concerned about the audio quality. And I have to give Alan the credit for this, because he said, there is a studio recording that never came out. I wonder if that still survives. And they checked and learned that it did still survive. And they said, maybe it makes more sense to put out the studio recording first, so that people who aren't fanatic yet about Hassan can hear something in good sound. And then we can put out the private recordings, which, as you can hear, they sound fine, but they don't sound like a pristine studio recording.
Sure.
The idea is now people want to hear more, and they're going to get to hear a lot more in this 2-CD set, which will actually blow their minds, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Well, it looks like Alan's calling in right now. Let's play a little bit of, let's see, what do I have queued up? Let's play a little bit of Off Minor, and
sounds great.
And then we'll get Alan in the conversation. So again, one of these solo renditions that Hassan Ibn Ali did that Alan Sukoenig recorded, and we'll have Alan on the line. Hold on. Buddhist monks off minor, performed by Hassan Ibn Ali from the brand new Retrospect in Retirement of Delay, the solo recordings. And we have on the line Alan Sukoenig, who recorded that with Hassan and was responsible for getting Hassan really out there with the legendary Hassan was the name of the release that the Max Roach Trio put out back in the mid-1960s, the only recording released during Hassan's lifetime. Alan and Louis, welcome back to WPFW.
Thank you, Rusty. Much.
Okay, so Alan, you wanted to comment a bit about off minor, as we mentioned, off mic, as they say.
Yeah, a couple of things. In the 40-page booklet that accompanies the release, there's an essay by the avant-garde jazz pianist Matthew Shipp, and he focuses on this tune. He says what is most striking is how Hassan makes a monk tune work within his universe as a vehicle for his own devices. It almost has the feel of something Hassan might have written himself, only because it falls so in line with his sound. This is extraordinary. I have never, ever seen a pianist make a monk tune bend to his or her will to this degree and so naturally.
Yes.
So I thought that was worth pointing out.
Oh, absolutely. Matthew Shipp's an incredible pianist in his own right, and a friend of mine. I'm glad you included him in this great book. The packaging for this is just remarkable in terms of the booklet and the essays that you have included with Louis Porter and the stuff that you did. Tell us a little bit about these particular recordings. How you convinced him that, hey, I can set up a tape recorder and we're in this dormitory lounge. Let's do it. How did that happen?
Well, it happened in the following way. When I met Hassan, he was in the process. He was with my friend Dave Schreier, who had previously told me about Hassan, and I walked in on I heard Hassan playing in the student union building that I was in at the time. And I ran down to the auditorium, and I found Hassan and Dave. And Dave had a tape recorder with him. I don't know what he recorded on that day, because those tapes, if he did record anything at all, they're gone. We don't know anything about that. But apparently, I don't know how he first broached the matter to Hassan about recording, but there was no problem whatsoever. Hassan was happy to be recorded. And on another occasion, probably about 2 months later, in June 22nd to be precise, of 1962, Hassan and Dave and I went over to what was then called the women's dormitory. They had a nice lounge with a baby Baldwin Grand, quiet acoustics, and it was a good place. Dave brought his recorder with him. It wasn't a portable recorder, but he brought it over and recorded Hassan. And then that was in June of '62. The following spring, I graduated, and 63. And my mother gave me as a graduation present a portable Norelco reel-to-reel recorder. And I immediately set about looking for things to record, people to record. The first use that I put it to, as far as I remember, was to bring it down to the Showboat, which was one of the leading clubs in Philly in those days, to record John Coltrane at a Monday matinee. And then 3 months later, he came back. 2 or 3 months later, he came back to the same club, and I recorded him again. But eventually, and I say eventually because Hassan was not always accessible. He sadly, and things would have turned out differently for his career, I think, if this hadn't been the case. But sadly, he was frequently found himself incarcerated for drug use. So eventually, in October of '64, I was no longer living in Philly, but I made frequent trips back there to see friends. And we were able to do something with my machine, and that's how it happened.
Now, this is all around the same time that he did get that recording date with Atlantic under.
Yes, it was very close in time, because that date happened in December of '64.
Now, this is at a time when you had all kinds of famous names writing liner notes. How did you get to write the liner notes for the Max Roach Trio featuring the legendary Hassan?
Well, when Hassan told me that he had made the record, excuse me, sorry. When Hassan told me that he had the recording date, I had this fantasy that I could write the liner notes, and I threw together very quickly a kind of a sample article about Hassan, and I dropped it off at Atlantic. And somebody from Atlantic called me, I guess a few days later, and said, "You've got the job, because you seem to be the only person who knows anything about him," which was funny.
It is remarkable in terms of the I'd say not the notoriety, but the influence that he had on Philadelphia musicians at that time.
Yes.
Of course, Odeon Pope had not recorded before the Lost album was recorded, and it took decades for it to come out. But he spent decades working with Max Roach. But the other musicians were all familiar with him coming out of Philadelphia. I'm sure Kenny Barron was, and McCoy Tyner. They all knew who Hassan was, and he had an influence on them.
Yes.
And yet, yeah.
Yes, you're absolutely right. In fact, we know for a fact that Coltrane had gigs with Hassan in 1949, a series of gigs, like once a week for 10 weeks or for something like that. And there, at least at one point, there was a short tape of a jam session between Hassan and Coltrane, which over the years disappeared. Kenny's older brother, Bill Barron, was very acquainted with Hassan and played with him on occasion. And yes, he did have an impact on McCoy. And although it's funny that one time that McCoy referred to Hassan in print, he said, "There's this amazing pianist in Philadelphia who had an impact on me." And it has to be Hassan. He didn't name him, but it must be Hassan.
I'm going to, I guess, Louis, comment on Hassan as a composer. We're going to hear "Off My Back, Jack," one of the shorter pieces, and then come back and talk some more. So comment a little bit about his compositions.
His tunes are very offbeat. They're very rhythmic, as people will hear in this one. They kind of go to unexpected places, even though the overall structure may be familiar. It may be what we call an AABA form, where there's a bridge somewhere in the middle. But they definitely go to unexpected places. And in fact, I'll mention that as a kind of a tribute to all this Hassan that I and Alan are involved with this year, at Alan's suggestion, I recorded a Hassan composition which exists in his handwriting, but nobody ever recorded it. And if anyone's interested in looking that up, I hope I can mention
sure.
a fellow radio station. It's on the website of WRTI.org, the Philadelphia station. There's a video of me playing it, because he is a very fascinating composer.
Let's hear it. "Off My Back, Jack."
You know what I haven't heard you play? Is that the tune you used to play, the ballad, "Off My Back, Jack."
Oh,
remember that? Sure.
I forgot it.
Really?
Yeah, I forgot it. That's the music
Wee, or the cycle of four, sin.
I forgot it.
Wee, doo. Up in the melody. Dwee, doo, wee.
You listen to Thursday Late Night Jazz. I'm Rusty Hassan. We just heard Off My Back Jack from Hassan Ibn Ali, Retrospect in Retirement of Delay, the solo recordings. And we have Alan Sukoenig and Lewis Porter on the line. Gentlemen, tell me the significance of the title.
Good question.
I can speak to that.
I'll let Alan do that.
Okay.
But I'd like to first mention, though, that I'm not able to hear. I wasn't able to hear anything that Lewis said. I could hear his voice in the background, but I couldn't make out what he was saying.
I don't want to take away time.
So somehow what I say may wind up not being responsive to what Lewis is saying, if that happens. But anyway, I apologize in advance. The title is as follows. Hassan wrote letters. Wrote letters from home. He wrote letters when he was incarcerated. And every letter that he wrote, he put a title to, as if it were music. And one letter that he wrote to Dave Schreier, who, as I mentioned earlier, is the person who introduced me to Hassan, was titled Retrospect in Retirement of Delay. And I thought that was great, but I had no idea what it meant until shortly before this album came out, and I was writing the liner notes, and it occurred to me that a case could be made for this, meaning that Hassan realized that he wasn't going to be known in his lifetime, and there was going to be a long delay, and we're going to have to look back retrospectively at what he did after the delay has been retired or put to rest. That's the interpretation I chose to give to it.
Okay.
To give to it.
I love that.
It's a fantastic.
And there's also a short but very funny story about the cover painting, because it's very simple. What happened there is when the first release came out, the quartet with Odin, an artist sent this painting to the record label as just kind of a thank you. I loved that so much, and inspired me to do this painting. They very creatively wrote him back and said, "We love it. We'd like to use it on the next album."
Oh, it's incredible. It's a wonderful package. Now, how can folks obtain the CD?
The good news is that it's now available in all the usual places.
Okay.
At, Amazon and you name it, And there will be, there's, as you know very well, Leslie, there's a small but very fanatic community of vinyl people. And the good news is there will be vinyl, but that's going to be a few months. It's one of these, what they're now calling supply chain problems. But there will be vinyl in 2022.
Fantastic. This is just incredible. I'm really in awe. Some of the pieces are really long. He really stretches out, and on another occasion I will play some of the longer pieces. But Alan, before you got on the line, Lewis and I were conversing, and one of the pieces, and I think Matt Chips refers to it also, is what Hassan does with Besame Mucho.
Yeah.
Tell us about.
Funny.
Tell us about what is happening.
Well, what happened there? Am I speaking on top of Lewis? I don't want to do that.
No, you're on your own right now.
Okay. What happened was there was a young woman, student, sitting near the piano, and Hassan asked her if she had any requests, and she said, "Play a bridge song," which was confusing to Hassan, confusing to me, and she repeated it, "Play a bridge song," and he played Besame Mucho. I think that was Hassan's attempt to establish a relationship of some kind.
Well, we will.
And in fact, I just want to throw in that probably the most exciting thing about this whole release is, for the first time, people can hear Hassan playing other people's music, and now you have a basis to compare him with other pianists playing some of these same things, and it's kind of exciting to be able to put him in there with all these other players.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, this has been a real delight featuring his music. You know, the last time we featured Metaphysics, and this time the 2 CD solo recordings. They're just phenomenal. And again, the usual sources for obtaining compact discs. It's also available on streaming services, I imagine.
Absolutely.
As a lot of folks do obtain it. I don't know. I have too much vinyl, and I'm overwhelmed with CDs, but I like to have the hard product. And for programming, you know, for most announcers are still using compact discs to feature the music, so it becomes in handy. And
the album is on Spotify. You're absolutely right, and all the other streaming services.
Right. You know, one of the things that's so important, and this collection really exemplifies it, is the importance of liner notes. You know, in terms of having all the information that you have in a booklet, really is important in terms of informing people about the artist and the music. And that's the one thing I miss, you know, on the streaming of music, is getting that information about it. And this is just marvelous in terms of the booklet that you guys have assembled and written for this.
Well, you know what happened was, I had the liner notes pretty well. I thought I had them pretty well finished, and I wasn't thrilled with what I had written. It didn't really bring Hassan to life. And then in June, Lewis notified me that Homer Jackson in Philadelphia, who's an important person in the jazz world, not a musician himself, but other things, promoting and so on and so forth, had a connection that he wanted to pass along to a person who's a visual artist, a painter, named Leroy Johnson, who was back in the day had been Hassan's drug rehabilitation counselor, and it was fascinating to interview him. He gave me some very good stuff, which I incorporated in the notes here. And then he took it upon himself to find some other people. He found actually three musicians who either knew Hassan or had known him and or had studied with him. The person who had studied with him, unfortunately, I was not able to connect with. He had some medical problems at the time. I hope I can still interview him at some point. But the other two people, Kenyatta Thompson, Sr., and Marion Salam, were very helpful, and I incorporated what they told me. So with all this information, and then also something that Lewis was able to find, the defunct magazine, jazz magazine called Cadence, which was published from out of Philadelphia, and Lewis, I've forgotten the name of the editor-in-chief.
That's all right.
Well, Alan, I want to just say, not only did you bring him to life in your current liner notes, but you did so 56 years ago with the liner notes to the Max Roach Trio featuring the legendary Hassan. So your writing skills have stayed with you, because the original notes certainly did the job back then.
Well, that's kind of your Rusty. I didn't know much. I didn't have the connections to other people, but this magazine that I mentioned, Cadence, which is defunct, as I said, they frequently asked people whom they interviewed, especially Philadelphia musicians, about Hassan, simply because the editor-in-chief was a Hassan fan. And Lewis was able to dig up that information, which is not normally available to the public, but was available to him because of his status as a jazz historian. And I want to mention that information, combined with the other stuff that I told you about, really did go a long way to pepping up the notes somewhat and bringing Hassan to life, at least more than he had been in what the notes I originally had.
As you were about to comment, Lewis,
I want to mention that also Alan knows Hassan's music better than anybody I know, because he's listened to these tapes or whatever it is 50 years or more. And that's why on the track you played before, Alan said, that's Alan saying to Hassan, how about that one tune? And Hassan says, I don't know if I remember it.
So
and Alan has to sing it to him. So no, it goes like this.
Right.
I love that.
Wow. Gentlemen, it's been great talking with both of you. We've been talking about Retrospect and Retirement of Delay, the solo recordings, Hassan Ibn Ali. And you're tuned to WPFW 89.3 in Washington. Again, my guests, Alan Sukoenig and Lewis Porter. This is Rusty Hassan with Thursday Late Night Jazz, as we hear Hassan's rendition of Bésame Mucho. Gentlemen, thanks again for calling in, and it's been a real pleasure talking with you.
Well, thank you, Rusty. It's been a pleasure talking with you, too.